5 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. At the time, I didn't think about the consequences. Blinded by selfishness and a vague longing for something I couldn't even define, I strayed from Ethan, my husband. Ethan was everything a woman could hope for, kind, loyal, and loving. We had been married for 3 years, and he treated me like I was the center of his world. But for reasons I couldn't explain, I began to feel trapped, even bored. I convinced myself that I needed more excitement, more passion. Ethan worked long hours to provide for us, but I misinterpreted his dedication as neglect. I felt lonely, and instead of talking to him about how I felt, I sought validation elsewhere. That elsewhere came in the form of a co-worker, someone who flattered me and made me feel things I foolishly believed were missing in my marriage. It started innocently enough. Shared lunches, inside jokes, and text messages that slowly shifted from casual to inappropriate. Before I realized it, I had crossed a line I could never uncross. When Ethan found out, it was as though I had shattered his heart. He didn't yell or scream. He just looked at me, tears filling his eyes, and whispered, "Why, Mia? Was I not enough for you?" I had no answer. What could I say? That it was a mistake? That I didn't mean to hurt him? None of it mattered because the damage was done. I had betrayed the man who loved me unconditionally. I watched the light in his eyes dim as he silently packed his things and left. I tried to apologize, to beg for his forgiveness, but Ethan was done. He didn't deserve the pain I had caused him, and deep down I knew it. We divorced soon after, and I was left alone, consumed by regret. The years that followed were a blur. I buried myself in work, dated casually, but nothing ever felt right. Every man I met reminded me of what I had lost. Ethan's face, his smile, his laugh, they haunted me. So many times, I wanted to reach out to him, to ask for another chance, but I couldn't. I told myself he deserved peace, and I had already caused him enough pain. Life moved on, but the ache in my chest never went away. And then one day, everything changed. At IT happened on a typical afternoon. I was sitting in a coffee shop, sipping my latte and scrolling through my phone, when I saw him, Ethan. He walked in, looking as handsome as ever, but there was something different about him. His posture was more confident, his movements more assured. There was a calmness about him that I didn't recognize, but it only made my heart race faster. I froze, unsure what to do. Should I hide behind my menu or leave before he noticed me? Before I could decide, his eyes locked onto mine. For a moment, his expression showed surprise, but it quickly shifted to something calm and unreadable. Slowly, deliberately, he made his way toward me. "Mia," he said, his voice steady and composed. "Hi, Ethan," I replied, my voice trembling. It felt surreal to see him again after all these years. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. I nodded silently, unable to find my voice. My heart was pounding as he pulled out the chair and sat down. Up close, I noticed the subtle changes in him. Faint lines around his eyes, a maturity in his demeanor. He didn't look angry or hurt, just resolved. "It's been a long time," he said, breaking the silence. 5 years, I whispered, barely audible. The weight of unspoken words hung heavily in the air. I couldn't bring myself to meet his eyes, afraid of what I might see there. Finally, I forced myself to ask the question that had been haunting me since the moment I saw him. "How have you been?" He smiled faintly, leaning back in his chair. "Better. It took a while, but I found peace. Life's good now." His words hit me harder than I expected. I had always hoped he would move on and find happiness, but hearing it out loud felt like a knife to my heart. Still, I knew I had no right to feel that way. "I'm glad," I said, my voice trembling. "You deserve it." Ethan studied me for a long moment, his piercing gaze making me feel as though he could see right through me. Then he leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "Why did you do it, Mia?" The question I had been dreading for years. I swallowed hard, feeling tears sting my eyes. I don't know, I admitted, my voice cracking. I was selfish, insecure. I thought I needed something else, something I didn't have. But I was wrong, Ethan. I see that now, and I'm so sorry for what. I know what I did to you, I whispered, my voice breaking. Tears streamed down my face, and I couldn't stop them. Ethan nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. I spent years trying to understand it, he said. At first, I was angry. I wanted to hate you, but I couldn't. You were my wife, Mia. I loved you. He paused, his voice catching. He stopped himself, shaking his head as though to push the thought away. I loved you more than anything, and you broke me. His words cut deep, sharper than I thought they would. I choked back a sob, my voice trembling as I said, I know. I know I did, and I hate myself for it. Every single day. If I could go back, I'd do everything differently, but I can't. Ethan sighed deeply, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. His expression softened for the first time. I've forgiven you, Mia. Not for you, but for me. Holding on to that anger, that pain, it was eating me alive. Forgiving you was the only way I could move on. His words felt like a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. He had forgiven me, but it was clear that forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. He had built a new life for himself, one that no longer included me. I'm glad you found peace, I said, my voice unsteady. I've thought about reaching out so many times, but I didn't want to disrupt your life. I didn't deserve your forgiveness, Ethan. I still don't. He smiled faintly, a sad, sincere smile. You're right, he said. You didn't deserve it. But I gave it anyway, not for you, but because I needed to let go of the past. And you should too, Mia. Carrying that guilt won't help you. His words stung, but I couldn't deny their truth. I had been dragging the weight of my mistakes for so long that I didn't know how to let them go. Are you happy now? I asked hesitantly, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded. I am. It wasn't easy, but I rebuilt my life. I found someone who loves me, someone I can trust. We're expecting our first child soon. His words felt like a punch to the gut. He had truly moved on, created a life I could no longer be part of. And yet, despite the pain, I was happy for him. He deserved all the happiness in the world. That's wonderful, Ethan, I said, forcing a smile through my tears. I'm so happy for you. He stood up, the sound of his chair scraping against the floor jarring in the quiet coffee shop. For a moment, he looked at me as if debating whether to say something more. Finally, he spoke. I hope you find peace too, Mia. You need to let go of the past. I have. And just like that, he turned and walked away, leaving me sitting there with tears streaming down my face. I watched him go, knowing this was the last time I would ever see him. He had moved on, found happiness, and left the pain of our past behind. As I sat there in the empty coffee shop, the realization hit me. It was time for me to do the same. Ethan had forgiven me, but now I needed to forgive myself. Only then could I truly move forward and start over.